Welcome back. I have another wonderful story to tell you today about human beings. Remember the talking that we've done about the special gifts of the human and how the human was given the gift of the special mind and the special heart and the special hands. And some of you have got to have the lesson on the hand timeline. It's like the black strip, but when we unroll it, we get to see the hand doing their work. And we've talked a lot about the work that humans have done with their hands and all the really cool things that we have been able to do because of our hand. And we've talked about how we use our hands to meet our needs. But on that hand timeline, as we unrolled it, there was just that tiny white strip all the way at the end. And I told you that that white strip is all of written history. Now, in that tiny white strip, that is the time that humans have been using their hands to communicate using writing. And so this story today is the story of writing. No one knows exactly how long humans have been on Earth. So this is a once upon a time type of story, but it is a true story. You remember the rules for life, that all living things need to eat and grow and make more like themselves. So let's think about the need to eat. Humans are a form of life and thus need to eat to stay alive. We know our ancestors met their need to eat because we're still here today. The way that they met their need for food is different than how we meet our need for food today. They didn't have refrigerators, cupboards, and stores. They didn't have restaurants. They didn't even have farms. Our ancestors, they ate plants they could find and animals they could catch. And when they were able to find a source of food, they shared that information with each other. And then through stories about places, they could communicate about the food. They probably said something like, "These are really good berries. Go to the second bush down from the stream." Or, "There are juicy crickets in the thicket." So as there were more and more people, they had to move and explore and find other things to eat. What would happen when your family and friends were too far away to shout about the berries or the crickets? What if they needed to give you a warning? Maybe, "Don't eat these leaves, they'll make you sick." Humans had a big problem to solve. How could they communicate with people who were not there to tell? One of our ancestors is an unknown hero. Long, long ago, somewhere, someone had the idea that we could make some sort of a picture or a sign to leave a message. Maybe some of those were drawings of like a happy face in the sand under a tree that had safe nuts to eat. Leaving some kind of a picture or sign could give someone else a message. Remember how long of a timeline of the hand timeline was white? Just a small sliver of human history. That was the time when humans began creating symbols to leave a message and communicating with signs. And that white strip, that is the time that people were able to get what they thought was important for others to know and share that with other people. I'd like to talk about another group of people. This group of people lived in just one place. They lived along the Nile River, and these people were the Egyptians. They lived in one place instead of moving around, and this allowed them to create a more advanced way of living. They developed this idea of picture writing. The pictures had meanings, and they called this collection of images hieroglyphics. They believed that their pictures were so sacred, the name they gave them means holy carved writing. Hieroglyphics means holy carved writing. First, when the Egyptians were doing this picture carving, they were carved into stone, and then they started using paints, and much, much later, they used a special paper that they created from the papyrus plant. The Egyptians had their collection of pictures, but only a few Egyptians could read or write. And even among those, they had a lot of trouble because there were hundreds and hundreds of pictures to learn. And it was hard to know just what each picture meant. And there were many interpretations. Some pictures stood for a thing, like a carving of a leg could literally mean leg. But sometimes the picture could mean the idea of something, like that same leg carving could mean walk. Another meaning could have been that for the leg to mean something like fast. Finally, that leg carving could simply stand for the sound that the word leg begins with, L. This led to a very difficult job of interpreting what other another person had carved. Every time you would see an image, you would have to determine the meaning of what was written. No wonder there were only a few people who could read and write hieroglyphics. Now, nearby to the Egyptians lived another group of people, the Phoenicians. Remember, the Egyptians stayed on the bank of the Nile River. Well, the Phoenicians, they were sailors and merchants. They would visit lands all over and trade with others for food, spices, cloth, animals, lumber, minerals, plants, jewelry, pretty much anything that could be traded for in the area. And they sailed all over the Mediterranean Sea, and they carried as many of these different goods as they could. One of the things they took was a cloth dyed with a very special color. Tyrian purple came from the city of Tyre. And since the Phoenicians were from the city of Tyre, they were the only ones who knew how to make this special dye. The people of Tyre kept the secret of the special way they created the color. Since this special dye came from only one place, it was a very prized and valuable thing. And at first, only the royals could have it. If you've ever wondered about royal purple. Eventually, some people or more people could afford to trade for it, and those people would race to the harbors when a Phoenician ship would come into port, and they would try to trade for some Tyrian purple cloth. Tyrian purple isn't valuable anymore, and though you probably don't have any Tyrian purple cloth yourself, this is part of your story too. The Phoenicians knew about the Egyptian hieroglyphics and how the picture carvings had meaning. They saw the challenges that the Egyptians had with making meaning from the symbols. And since the Phoenicians had a lot to write down with the buying and selling and trading, they needed something easier to record their business. So the Phoenicians did what humans do. They saw a problem and they needed to fix it. They decided to throw out all of the Egyptian hieroglyphics that didn't mean or didn't interpret to the letter of a sound. They only kept the sound pictures and made them much simpler and easier to draw. Instead of a whole leg, they would just draw a line. And that line stood for the sound ooh, like leg. They made sure there was a picture that stood for every sound in their alphabet. This allowed the Phoenicians to write any word they could say if they had a symbol for every sound. Do you know who else discovered this? You. When you learned the sounds of the letters, you were relating pictures to their sound, the same as the Phoenicians did, just many, many, many years later. If you want to write out the word cat, you need a symbol for the k, one for the a, and one for the t. When the Phoenicians sailed into ports with Tyrian purple, they left behind something that they didn't realize they were doing. They left behind their sound alphabet. This is important because even though some didn't think it was important, it still spread all over the region. One of the first people to get a hold of this Phoenician alphabet, these Phoenician letters, were the Greeks. And as people tend to do, they liked what was there, but they wanted to make some changes. They added a few of their sounds. After the Greeks shared their letters, the Romans took a turn to make a few changes. The Romans took the first two sounds, which had been developed by the Phoenicians, and they wrote them like this. They took the names of the letters that the Phoenicians had developed, the Aleph and the Bet, and in their honor named the group of letters the Aleph-Bet, or what we call the alphabet. The Aleph-Bet. The first letters were capital. Do you know how we know that? We know that because the Romans carved their letters in stone, and we can still see them today. So, gosh, we can think all the way back to the Egyptians for carving the first stone pictures, and then we can thank the Phoenicians for sharing their letter sounds or their sound alphabet, and the Greeks for adding their sounds, and the Romans for adding their sounds, but also giving us this beautiful name, the Aleph-Bet, or the alphabet. Now, the importance of writing became widespread, and many people in many cultures began using the Roman alphabet. With this big change in the way people communicated, some people thought that it might be magic or even witchcraft. They questioned anything that could capture the thoughts of one person and transfer those thoughts without speaking to someone else. And they thought that maybe this was dangerous. So what we would write, if I wrote that, I have to whisper it because you're not here. But if I were to write, go to the door and clap 3 times, only you would know that because I wouldn't have to whisper it. I could show it to you. Another thing about writing is that we can communicate when we're not here. Do you know how we're reading Pippi Longstocking right now? Well, the author of Pippi Longstocking, Astrid Lindgren, she's not here. She's not here in Spokane, but we're able to read her thoughts. Maybe it's interesting to know that we can read the thoughts of people who are no longer alive. We can read the thoughts of people who lived long, long ago. And that's how we learn about history. This has been such a great story about the thoughts of others across time and distance. This ability for writing that made human beings so very, very powerful and has made some of our ancestors' memories last forever. Even if we weren't here to hear their stories, they figured out a way to pass them down to us. The Phoenicians had a very good idea to keep the sound hieroglyphics from the Egyptians, and I am very thankful to the Phoenicians for giving us the gift of writing. I hope that you enjoyed this story about our sound alphabet, and maybe you've heard, we talked about the Phoenicians, maybe you've heard about phonics, listening to the sounds. So we can thank the Phoenicians every time we read, and we can thank them every time we write, and every time we're sounding something out. I can't wait to hear what inspired you from this story. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.